such a funny thing because it sort of presents very easy and then like immediately gets more frustrating. But so this exercise is sort of similar. But so it'll be this is just a little finger independence exercise. So we want to get each of these fingers to move when our brain tells them to, and we have to kind of train them to do that. And so right to start out with, we're just going to start with our index and our middle finger to start out. And we're going to play the 4th and 5th fret on the G string, so index finger, 4th fret, and then middle finger, 5th fret. And this is all going to be alternating strokes, so always down, up with our right hand. So 4, 5, and then we're going to do the same thing on the D string. We're going to play the 4th fret. And if you're on more of a beginner level, just focus on, you know, getting your finger over to the 4th fret. If you're a little more intermediate advanced, then I want you to try to, when you put down your 4th finger on the G string, when you put down the 5th finger, to not lift up the 4th finger. A lot of time we have this instinct because we're thinking of each individual note. You think about the 4th fret, and then you're thinking about the 5th fret, so you lift up your index finger and put down the middle finger. We don't want to do that. We want to put down our 4th fret, and then put down our middle finger and keep our index finger down. You don't have to keep pushing all the way down if it's uncomfortable, but just you don't have to lift it up off of the string. So then when we move to the D string, I can move my computer a little bit closer so you can see my hand a little bit better. You're moving only the index finger, and then we're going to move only the middle finger. And again, if you're at a more beginner level, just focus on the notes. But and then to the A string, same thing, index, middle, and then the E string, index, middle. So far. Let's try that together a couple times. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and so you're just focusing on if you're in more of a beginner level, you're just focusing on having that independence, and then the second level is only picking up the finger when you need to, and only each individual finger. So now we're going to go back down, but we're going to do just a different grouping of frets. We're going to slide up, play the 7th fret with our middle finger, and then we're going to play the 6th fret with our index finger. So after we get there, we're going to slide up 7th fret, 6th fret. And when you lift up your middle finger here, again at the higher level, but even at the beginner level, you want to kind of just pay attention to. You don't want your fingers to come out far away. You want to lift it up as little as possible. I don't know if you can actually see. That's how much I'm lifting it off. Truly, extremely little. And that's just because if your fingers go all the way out here, for one thing, that's a lot of energy to expend to get the fingers out here. But then when you're going to immediately need your middle finger, and you're going to have to bring it all the way back. So it's just a good habit to keep your fingers here. I don't know if he's on the call, but I gave the link to my friend Bob, who showed me how to play the mandolin. And Bob would stand in front of me during lessons with a note card and hold a 3x5 note card in front of my hand about an inch away from my fingers, and I would play tunes and try to just not hit the note card. That was the practicing. So 7 and 6, and then we're going to go over to the A string, only middle finger. So middle finger, 7th fret of the A string, 6th fret. Now the D string, 7th fret, 6th fret, G string, 7th fret. 6th fret. So all of that so far together is, then up to the 7th, 6th, and so far all just with our index and middle finger. Play it together a little bit slow. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, now 7, 6, and again. One more time. And if that's too quick for you, please slow it down for yourself. You want to make sure that all of those notes are really ringing out, and especially if you're at that more intermediate level, part of the purpose of leaving your finger down after you play is that if you pick your finger up in between playing those notes, there's this fraction of a second where the note cuts off before you're playing the next note, and it gives the note this really truncated feeling, and it just doesn't let the notes all ring out. And so you have to leave your fingers down if you're going to try to play anything legato, like flowing sounding, but just in general, to have that control of how long those notes are holding for, like actively sort of thinking about that, is what phrasing is, and that's a huge part of taking a step into playing the mandolin in a way that sounds more like whatever genre of music you're trying to play. I saw Eric ask if I chose these frets for any reason in particular. Answer is no. They seemed like non-intimidating frets. They are about halfway up the fretboard because it's a little bit easier for people. It's kind of a middle ground as far as how far away the notes are. It's actually easier to practice things further up the fretboard, assuming your mandolin's set up okay, because the frets are closer together, so there's not as much stretching. Of course, there's not a whole lot of stretching in this particular exercise. But so there's the next step in this exercise. It's almost exactly identical. We're just going to change our fingers. So we're going to do the exact same notes, but this time we're going to use our middle and our ring finger. So we're going to play the 4th fret with our middle finger, and then the 5th fret, G string, with our ring finger, and go through the same exercise, just using our our middle and ring finger. And then once you get here, sliding up to the 7th fret, down to the 6th with the middle, 7th on the A with the ring, middle on the 6th fret, D string, G string. And so again, just keeping your left hand technique in mind, trying to only lift up your fingers when you need them. It is going to start to get harder to push down these notes if you're not as used to doing this sort of thing. So one thing we can look at is our left hand technique in general. When we're doing this, when you're pushing down against the string, you need leverage, and so are sort of like a force pushing back this direction, so you can actually push the string down. And a lot of our the things that we go for with that are bad for our hands, and not the most effective things. So one of those is people will like fully grasp the neck of the mandolin and have it sitting in this, and you don't want to do that, because what that'll do is it puts a lot of tension in your wrist, for one thing. And you can see my fingers are way farther past the fretboard. So when I have to get to the higher strings, there's a lot of tension because I'm having to stretch my fingers back here. The other thing people will do, sort of the opposite, is have their thumb behind the neck, like on a guitar or a bass, and you also don't want that. It puts too much pressure on the thumb. Excuse me. And to get to the lower strings, you have to like sort of bend your hand in a kind of weird way. That's also just not very effective. So you can see where the marks on the neck of my mandolin are here on the side and on the side, but you'll notice there's nothing on the back. And if you imagine these two fingers like as the outside edges of the neck, they're resting right here in between this joint, the first joint on my index finger, and the ball joint sort of on my thumb. So rather than having like a point of contact on the back of the neck, like a single point of contact, the flared out outside edges of the neck are resting on between these two joints. And what that does is that when it's resting like this, oh gosh, it's so hard to show on a camera. So for one thing, you can see there's this gap. There's like, you can see through my hand. And when I play notes, for example, like a full G chop chord, I have to have my hand like this, gosh, so that all my fingers can use the fingertip, and they can all reach really comfortably to wherever they need to go without having to bend my hand. So that's just a quick little left hand technique refresher for some of the difficulty for this part. So let's play this version of this exercise together. So again, 4th fret, 5th fret, all the way up to E, and then we're going up to the 7th fret, and we're using our middle and ring finger. So 1, 2, 3, and only lifting up when you need to, if you can, up to the 7th fret, 6th, whoops, one more time, good job. You might have noticed I was sort of watching my left hand in the video there. My pinky sort of moving around, and when I watch people do this, there's for some reason like an instinct to put our pinky sort of underneath the neck. It sort of like just hides there. You don't want that. You just try to avoid that. But the reason that our pinky kind of moves is because for most, I think it's like 99.9% of people, you share a tendon between the pinky and the ring finger. So it's really hard to develop any sort of interdependence between them. And even then, it's very difficult to not have the other one move. It's just physically how your body works. So you could see when I was doing that, my pinky's kind of moving around a little bit, but I'm making sure to not put it underneath the bridge or fretboard, because you just don't want that. Eric, I saw in the chat, was asking if my palm ever touches the back of the neck, and no, as you can see, lots of markings on my neck, but not on the back at all. The only time it would ever, there are some very weird chords that I try to do that are not reasonable. Like I was trying to do one the other day, it was like something like that, whereas like then my thumb is back there just because I decided that wasn't reasonable, and I switched to that. Gerard is asking if the grip is similar to how a fiddle is held. I'm not much of a fiddle player, so I'm not sure if I could say for certain, but I think that yes, my memory of a few years of orchestra in high school makes me think that yeah, it's pretty similar to how the fiddle is held, rather than how um, like a guitar. I think there's more thumb behind the neck for guitar, for some guitar. Not sure. Also, not much of a guitar player. Mostly just know about the one thing. Okay, so just one last version of this exercise, and that's the hardest part. We're going to try using our ring finger and our pinky. So it's going to be... and it's going to feel weird. It's okay. So if you're just... if it's difficult to even just play those notes, then just focus on getting those notes and trying to make them sound nice. And with some practice, you can focus on the other left hand things of only lifting up your fingers when you need to. And it's a little harder on the left hand, just in general. Because these fingers just aren't as strong. So it's easier to start squeezing to try to get that leverage and feel some tension. If you feel a lot of tension in your hand, you can just stop and shake out your hand. You don't need to hurt yourself practicing these things. But it's just a really easy version of like a crawling exercise. I don't know, easy, but like straightforward version of a crawling exercise to work on finger interdependence. I think I learned that by modifying. There's this. Is it in here? No, I think it's in the other room. There's this great book on banjo called Masters of the Five-String Banjo. Tony Trischka and Pete Wernick wrote it, and it's just an extremely nerdy book about how to play the banjo, with a lot of interviews with a lot of banjo players and like pictures of their hands. And in Alan Mundy's chapter, Alan does a lot of like really complicated like melodic style banjo playing, and there's some exercises he has for the banjo that are really similar to what I just showed you for working on finger interdependence. There was some other one. Oh yeah, it was kind of silly. I think I made a video of it for my Patreon page. I have like a Patreon page, and we do lessons and transcriptions and stuff. There was a harder one that was something like... something weird. Let's see. I have to click on the question to see all of it this time. Is it ever okay just to lean the finger over to the next string, or is it better to always pick it up entirely? I'd say if you can get away with just leaning your finger over, like I have pretty like skinny little fingers, so it's not usually an option for me. But if you can do that, it's generally just if it's gonna make it easier for you. We're always just trying to make everything easier for ourselves, as long as it's not hurting us in some way. So yeah, if you at a certain point, I'd feel like you'd have to pick up your fingers. But yeah, if you can just lean your fingers over, I think that's great. It's a good, like I said, I have kind of tiny fingers, so I like when I do single finger bar chords, like for our E minor chord on the mandolin, or open E minor, or we're playing the second fret on the D string and the A string, just using our index finger. What's happening is that my finger is pretty skinny, so it like, if you actually listen to each of these notes, I'm sort of aiming the very middle of the tip of this finger in between the D and the A string, and it can only actually cover two of those strings. So if you played all of the notes, the first one would be muted, the second one would be playing, the first of the A would be playing, but the last of the A wouldn't. But you can't actually hear that's what's happening. Are there any other questions? I don't know that I have enough time to show another full exercise, but I could answer some mandolin related questions. I'll vamp while people type. I just finished, I started doing a group workshop. So very similar to like what I just did, where showing things, breaking them down, and then playing them together. And it was a lot of fun. It is an hour long, and they're in 4-week blocks. So we'll do 4 weeks, and then I'll take a little break, and then we'll do 4 more weeks. And they're all on Zoom, and they're recorded just like this, so people can go back and watch if they can't tune in live. And it's pretty cheap. It's like $70 for all 4 weeks. I charge more than $70 for an hour lesson usually, so it's a very good deal in that respect. And it's fun, learning mandolin with a whole bunch of other people. I saw a question here. Is there a story of my mandolin? There actually is. I don't know if it's a super interesting story, but so it's a Stelling mandolin. Stelling is known for making banjos. And when I was learning to play the mandolin, we didn't have like a lot of money or anything, so I was just borrowing various mandolins. And at a certain point, I had borrowed a pretty nice one, and when the person wanted it back, I didn't want to go back to playing a worse mandolin, so I kind of needed to buy something. So, with the help of like my parents, like mustered together a little bit of money, and we could afford this one. Oh, hey Bob and Sarah, it's so good to hear from you. Bob taught me how to play the mandolin, so I went into a shop and I saw this one, and my dad has always played a Stelling banjo for as long as I've been alive. He won a Stelling banjo in a banjo contest back in I think it was 89, and so I just recognized the brand and I kind of liked it, and it turned out to be a really good mandolin. It sounded good in the shop, but it hadn't really been played very much, and it broke in really nicely. And so Jeff Stelling, who makes the banjos, I've never really gotten like a full story of what happened, but at some point he decided to start making mandolins, and I think that he was originally trying to build them based on this design that Lloyd Loar came up with after he left Gibson. So Lloyd Loar worked at Gibson as like the master luthier, and the Loar mandolins were they were based on the design of the Gibson mandolins up to that point. He just changed it a little bit. But then he went and studied, he got like a master's degree from Northwestern or something. And then he briefly tried to build his own mandolins that he thought would sound better because of some math or something. And they're terrible. They're very weird. I don't know. Maybe they're good for something. They're not good for playing bluegrass on, for one thing. But I think that Jeff, like, the shape is very similar in the early Stelling mandolins. They're very weird. Like, it's sort of like an A model, but with F holes and then sloped shoulders, like a guitar, sort of. Very weird. And Ronnie Reno, which is Don Reno's brother, had, I think, the first ever, because Jeff at that point was in, I think he was still in San Diego. Now his shop is in Virginia. At some point they changed into just being like, a mandolin-looking mandolin, and he always had a whole bunch of different people working on them, usually like different apprentices, working in his shop, and so like Kim Breedlove built a few Stelling mandolins, and I think most of the ones that people are familiar with are from Lebeda. I think they're from the Czech Republic, um, and but this was built by John Hamlet, who's a great luthier in his own right. I don't know how much work he does nowadays, but he told me that he built two of these exact. He was trying to build two that sounded exactly the same. So this was part of a set of two, and he said he liked how this one sounded better. But it's really pretty. I don't know if you can see it super well. It's got like tiger maple and stuff. Pretty little mandolin, you know. Sounds really nice. Well, there was another question. Let's see. Musically nice sounding finger benders or twisters that I have. I know that I have some. But
I think that was more of a compliment than a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I always try to make whatever things I'm working on sound nice. That's part of the point. It's not just working out our hands. We're also working on making things sound musical, because all those are going to transfer into like actually playing a tune. So like that even just learning to keep those fingers down in between, that changes into like the difference between sounding like to like just having more space for those notes is really big and important.
Awesome. Thanks, Tristan.
Of course.